The countryside was still caught between winter and spring, a hesitant season when the earth had begun to breathe again, yet the air still carried the memory of frost. The sky over the hills was a pale wash of silver blue, and the fields, still wet from the melting snow, shone faintly under the afternoon sun. The house stood a little apart from the road, a quiet, old place with white walls and a wide veranda that creaked when the wind turned. It was not large, but it had a sense of calm permanence, as though it had been waiting for people to return to it for years. Elena arrived a few days earlier than the others. She liked coming before the noise began, before her daughter and son-in-law brought their laughter, the bags of groceries, the clatter of dishes and music from the car. At 52, she valued silence in a way she never had when she was younger. She moved through the rooms like someone revisiting a memory, dusting the bookshelves, airing the curtains, lighting the first fire of the season. The house responded to her presence with a soft sigh, as if grateful for her hands, for her familiar touch. The mornings were long and quiet. She would wake early, when the mist still lingered over the meadow, and stand by the kitchen window with her cup of tea. The garden, still bare, looked almost shy, branches thin and pale, soil dark with promise. She liked to imagine how it would look in a few weeks, full of green again. When her daughter Anna called to say they would arrive by Saturday evening, Elena felt a mix of warmth and something else, a faint nervousness she couldn't quite explain. She adored her daughter, of course, and she liked Mark, Anna's husband, more than she had expected to. He was polite, attentive, always ready to help. Perhaps too ready, she sometimes thought, in that restless, youthful way that belonged to people who still believed they could fix everything. She smiled to herself, closing the phone and turning back to the window. Outside, a crow landed on the fence post, watching her as if guarding a secret. Mark drove the long road to the countryside with the windows half open, the wind mixing with the scent of wet earth. Anna slept beside him, her head tilted against the seat, her hair falling across her face. He loved her, there was no question about that. But lately, their days had grown full of small silences. Not arguments, not coldness, just space. He told himself it was normal. People changed. They worked too much, forgot to look at each other. Maybe the weekend at the house would help. He liked the place. Its stillness, the absence of deadlines, the sound of crickets at night. He also liked Elena, though he never said it aloud. There was something in her presence that calmed him, a steadiness he couldn't find in the rush of his own life. When they arrived, dusk had already begun to settle. The house stood under a soft veil of smoke from the chimney. Elena came out to greet them, her hands wrapped in a shawl. Her smile was quiet, but it reached her eyes. "Welcome home," she said. Mark carried the bags inside while Anna wandered from room to room, opening windows, humming to herself. The house filled with the scent of rain and pine wood. In the kitchen, Elena was preparing soup, her movements slow and sure. Mark offered to help, and she accepted, perhaps more to please him than from need. They worked in silence for a while, the only sound the rhythm of the knife against the cutting board and the soft bubbling from the stove. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that made the air between them feel alive but unspoken. "You still remember where everything is," she said finally, glancing at him. "I think this house remembers me," he replied with a smile. She looked at him for a second longer than she meant to, then turned back to the stove. The small exchange left a trace, not of attraction, not yet, but of awareness. That night, after dinner, Anna went upstairs early. She was tired from the week, from work, from travel, from life. Mark stayed behind to finish his glass of wine on the veranda. The night was cool, the air heavy with the scent of damp grass and wood smoke. Elena joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "It's colder than I expected," she said, sitting down beside him. "It's still early spring," he answered. "Everything's waking up slowly." They looked out over the dark meadow. A faint light from the moon caught the outline of the birches by the fence. Neither of them spoke for a long time. It wasn't uncomfortable, just a silence that allowed thought. Elena glanced at him from time to time. He seemed younger here than in the city, less guarded, less pressed by the invisible weight of ambition. She wondered what it was like to be 30 again, with so much still ahead. Mark, in turn, noticed the softness in her face that he hadn't before. Not beauty in the obvious sense, but a kind of quiet dignity, something that drew the eye because it asked for nothing. When she finally rose to go inside, he stood as well. "Good night, Elena." "Good night, Mark." The way she said his name felt natural, but the sound of it lingered in his mind after she left. The next morning came with fog. The world outside the windows was pale and unreal, as if the house had been moved into another world overnight. Elena was already awake, walking barefoot across the wooden floor, her robe brushing lightly against her ankles. She loved mornings like this, when everything seemed suspended between sleep and awakening. In the kitchen, Mark was making coffee. She paused at the doorway, watching him for a moment before speaking. "You're up early." "I couldn't sleep," he said. "The silence here, it's too alive." She smiled faintly, understanding. "It's the kind of silence that listens." They sat opposite each other, hands around warm mugs, the fog pressing gently against the windows. He told her about work, about the city, about how sometimes he felt like he was running after something invisible. She listened, not as a mother-in-law, but as a person who had once known what that kind of restlessness felt like. "When I was your age," she said softly, "I thought peace meant having everything in place, love, work, plans. Now I think peace is when you stop needing the world to explain itself." He looked at her as if trying to memorize the line. "That sounds beautiful." She laughed quietly. "It only sounds that way. It took years to mean it." As the day unfolded, the fog lifted. Anna joined them for breakfast, cheerful, unaware of the quiet exchange that had already passed between the two people she loved. The hours drifted by easily. Walks through the field, small talk, the comfort of shared meals. Nothing happened, and yet something subtle had shifted. By evening, the house glowed with lamplight, the smell of food and wood smoke mingling in the air. Elena sat by the window, knitting. Mark was reading, his book forgotten on his lap. Their silence, again, was not empty. Outside, the first stars appeared, faint, uncertain, like new beginnings. The days that followed slipped past like soft pages in an unread book. Spring, at last, had settled fully into the valley. The trees around the house grew pale green crowns, and the wind carried a scent of lilac and soil. In the early mornings, light poured through the windows so gently that even the dust in the air seemed to glow. Life in the house found its pattern again. Breakfast at the wide wooden table, long walks through the meadow, evenings by the fire. Yet beneath the simple rhythm, there was a change. Slight, almost invisible, like a new note joining a familiar melody. Anna was busy with her own thoughts. She had brought her laptop, and work filled most of her mornings. Sometimes she would sit in the study with her headphones, half lost to the world outside. Elena didn't mind. She had always believed that solitude was not the enemy of love but part of it. Mark, too, began to wander more often, into the garden, down the path that led to the small lake beyond the birch trees. One morning Elena found him there. The water was still, reflecting the clouds like a sheet of glass. He was sitting on the old pier with his shoes off, trousers rolled up, feet in the cold water. "You'll catch a chill," she said, smiling as she approached. He looked up, squinting against the light. "It wakes me up." She sat beside him, careful not to disturb the surface of the lake. The boards were warm beneath her hands. For a while they said nothing. A pair of swans drifted in the distance. "It's strange," he said finally, "how quiet everything feels here. I forget what day it is." "That's what I love about this place," she replied. "Time stops asking questions." He glanced at her. "Do you ever wish you could stay here forever?" She thought for a moment, eyes on the ripples near his feet. "Forever is a word for young people. But I like to think the house keeps a little piece of everyone who stays." He smiled at that, dipping his hand in the water, letting droplets fall like silver threads. She watched the movement, the simplicity of it, and felt a small, inexplicable warmth in her chest, Not excitement but recognition. Back at the house, Anna was on the phone, laughing with a friend from work. When she saw them return together, she waved, then turned away again, still talking. Elena went to the kitchen to prepare tea. Mark followed almost without thinking. She handed him a jar of honey to open. It was stiff from the cold, and he warmed it between his palms before twisting the lid free. Their fingers brushed briefly. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer than she intended. He nodded. "You're welcome." It was nothing, a domestic moment, yet afterward, both carried it with them like a faint fragrance that refused to fade. In the evenings, the air filled with the hum of insects, and the light stretched long across the hills. Sometimes they would all sit outside after dinner, watching the sunset burn through the trees. Anna would scroll through her phone or take photos of the sky, while Elena and Mark sat quietly, letting the colors sink into them. One such evening, Anna excused herself to call a colleague. The sun had already dropped behind the ridge, leaving the sky washed in rose and violet. Mark leaned back against the wooden post of the veranda, eyes half closed. "She's always been so full of plans," Elena said half to herself. "She gets that from you," he replied. She turned to him, surprised. "From me?" "Yes. The way she looks forward, the way she believes the next thing will always be better. I see it when she talks about her projects. You have the same faith, only quieter." She didn't answer right away. Compliments from him felt different. Not flattery, not idle politeness, but something that saw through her without intruding. "Maybe," she said at last. "I just learned to wait instead of chase." He looked at her, thoughtful. "And has waiting made you happier?" She smiled faintly. "It's made me real." The evening cooled. Fireflies appeared among the hedges, small and trembling like the beginnings of a dream. A few days later, Anna received an unexpected call from the city. Her office needed her for a meeting. Urgent, just one night away. She hesitated but finally agreed to go. "I'll be back tomorrow evening," she told them at breakfast. "Don't miss me too much." Elena laughed. "We'll try to survive." After she left, the house felt larger, the silence deeper. Elena spent the morning in the garden. Mark worked on fixing the old shed behind the orchard. They crossed paths occasionally, exchanging a few words, each aware, though neither would say it, that being alone together changed the air around them. By afternoon, clouds began to gather. The wind picked up, scattering petals from the apple trees. Elena was carrying a basket of laundry when the first drops fell. She hurried to the porch, but a sheet slipped from her hands and landed in the wet grass. Mark saw it from across the yard and came running. "Let me," he said, grabbing the edge before the wind could take it farther. Rain splashed against their faces. They both laughed, half soaked, the white fabric between them like a flag caught in flight. "Quick," she said, breathless, and they carried it inside, dripping, laughing still. When the door closed behind them, the laughter faded into a quiet that neither knew how to break. The rain beat hard against the roof. They stood there, water shining on their hair, on their hands. He reached to take the basket from her. Their fingers touched again. Longer this time, still innocent, yet full of something that made her heart stumble for a beat. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, unable to find words. The sound of rain filled the room like a steady heartbeat. When the storm passed, the world looked washed and new. They lit a small fire to dry the damp clothes, sitting nearby with mugs of tea. The light from the flames played over their faces, soft and uneven. Elena spoke first. "I sometimes forget how much I love storms. They make the world honest again." Mark looked at her. "You make it sound like the rain cleans more than the earth." "Perhaps it does." A silence followed, but not an awkward one. It was the kind that stretches gently, allowing the heart to listen to itself. Outside, drops fell from the eaves one by one, slow and bright. That night, Elena wrote a few lines in her journal before bed. She had always kept notebooks, small, filled with half-thoughts, fragments of dreams. This time her pen hesitated longer than usual. "There is peace in quiet company," she wrote. "Not the peace of solitude, but of being seen without demand." She closed the notebook and set it aside. The wind outside had gone still. Somewhere in the house she could hear the faint creak of floorboards. His footsteps, perhaps, or just the wood settling. Whatever it was, it felt like the sound of the world breathing beside her. The next morning dawned clear again. The storm swept far beyond the hills. The sky looked newly washed, and the fields shimmered under a film of dew. Elena woke early, drawn by the light pressing through her curtains. She moved quietly through the house so as not to wake Mark, though she knew he was an early riser too. In the kitchen the air smelled faintly of smoke from the night's fire. She poured herself a cup of tea and stepped outside. Mist rose from the grass, curling around the apple trees like breath. Everything felt strangely alive, as if the rain had rinsed away not only dust but worry itself. When Mark appeared a few minutes later, carrying a basket of kindling, she wasn't surprised. He smiled when he saw her. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she answered. They stood for a moment listening to the quiet. Birds called from the edge of the forest. Somewhere a stream gurgled, invisible but constant. "I fixed the hinge on the shed," he said. "It shouldn't creak anymore." She nodded. "You've been rescuing this place one piece at a time." He shrugged. "Maybe it's rescuing me." The remark hung between them, light as mist but real. She didn't reply, yet he could tell she understood. After breakfast they worked side by side in the garden. The soil was soft and dark, and new shoots were already pushing through the ground. Elena knelt to loosen weeds. Mark carried away the old branches. Their movements fell into an easy rhythm. Now and then they exchanged small jokes, laughter blending with birdsong. At one point she straightened up, brushing dirt from her gloves. "You know," she said, "when Anna was a child she hated helping me here. She said the worms were watching her." Mark laughed. "That sounds like her." "She hasn't changed much," Elena continued. "Still impatient with anything that grows too slowly." "Maybe that's why she married me," he said lightly. "I'm the same." Elena looked at him, smiling. "No, you're not. You notice things. You wait." He met her gaze, caught by the quiet certainty in her tone. The moment stretched, a small stillness in which the air itself seemed to listen. Then she bent again to her work, and the spell passed like sunlight through cloud. By afternoon the day grew warm. They carried a jug of lemonade to the veranda and sat in the shade. Bees moved lazily among the flowers. Mark rested his head against the railing, half dreaming. "You make it look so easy," he said after a while. "What?" "Belonging here. Knowing what to do with every hour." She smiled. "It isn't knowledge. It's surrender. The house tells you what it needs. You just have to listen." He nodded slowly. "That's what I never do in the city. Listen." The wind stirred the curtains behind them. Elena felt an impulse, sudden and small, to tell him something she hadn't told anyone in years. "When I was younger," she said, "I thought silence was emptiness. Now I know it's full. It's just not loud about what it holds." Mark turned that over in his mind. "Maybe that's what I'm learning here." She looked at him then, and something gentle moved between them. Not desire but understanding, that rare recognition that two lives, separated by years, can still speak the same language of quiet. Anna returned that evening, cheerful and tired from her trip. She brought noise back with her. Stories, plans, the city's fast rhythm. The house seemed to brighten, but a part of Elena and Mark felt the change like a sudden wind through still leaves. At dinner, Anna talked about her meeting while they listened. Elena watched her daughter's animated face and felt a rush of affection and gratitude. Gratitude for her laughter, for her energy, for the fact that love could exist in so many forms. Mark poured wine, smiling, joining in. The normal life resumed, seamless as before. Yet somewhere beneath it, a quieter current ran. Not wrong, not forbidden, simply unnamed. That night, after Anna had gone upstairs, Elena walked into the garden alone. The sky was dark velvet, the stars sharp as frost. She could hear the faint murmur of voices from the house. Anna's laughter, Mark's reply, then silence. She thought of the day. The rain, the shared work, the stillness between words. She realized that she didn't want anything from it. Not change, not confession. Just the simple knowledge that in the long middle of her life, something had reminded her how alive she still was. From the doorway, Mark appeared, leaning quietly against the frame. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Not yet," she said. "The night's too beautiful." He stepped beside her. They stood looking at the stars, shoulder to shoulder but not touching. The air smelled of grass and wood smoke. "It feels like the world is holding its breath," he murmured. "Maybe it's just listening," she said. And for a moment they listened too, to the hush of leaves, to the soft rhythm of their own hearts, to everything that existed in the space between words. Later, when she finally went inside, Elena paused by the staircase. She looked back once toward the veranda where the lantern still glowed faintly. The image would stay with her, the quiet figure against the light, the calm, the stillness. Upstairs, she lay awake a long time, not restless, just thoughtful. She realized that love need not always be a storm. Sometimes it could be a steady flame, one that burned without demanding, warming without consuming. Outside, the wind turned the pages of the trees, and somewhere far away, dawn began to stir. The week that followed unfolded gently, like the slow opening of a flower. Each morning began with light seeping through the lace curtains, carrying with it the scent of grass and distant rain. The world around the house was alive, bees trembling over lavender, finches darting through the orchard, the low hum of life returning after years of quiet. Elena had never realized how much beauty could fit into a single day until someone else began to notice it beside her. Mark had a way of observing the world that mirrored her own, yet came from another life. He saw details she had stopped seeing, the way shadows moved over the garden wall, the sound of a kettle cooling after tea. They spoke less than before, but their silences had begun to mean something. Sometimes they met in the kitchen without planning to. She would be peeling apples for a pie. He would come in to fetch a tool or a book. "Do you want a slice?" she would ask. "Only if you promise to have one too." Small words, nothing more. Yet afterward the air would hum with a kind of sweetness neither dared name. One afternoon Anna suggested a trip to the lake. "The weather's perfect," she said. "Let's have a picnic." Elena prepared baskets, fresh bread, cheese, cherries, and a bottle of white wine. The three of them walked down the path between fields glittering with wildflowers. Anna walked ahead, humming. Mark carried the heavier basket, while Elena followed a few steps behind, her hat shading her eyes from the sun. At the lake, they spread a blanket near the water's edge. The surface shimmered like glass. Dragonflies stitched the air with their blue wings. They ate, laughed, tossed crumbs to the ducks. At one point Anna went wading, her laughter echoing across the shore. Mark watched her with quiet affection, then glanced back at Elena. Their eyes met for an instant, a look not of guilt or longing, but of shared understanding, like two readers who reached the same page at once. Later, as Anna napped under a tree, Elena and Mark sat nearby. The world hushed except for the ripple of water. "She's happy," Mark said. "She is," Elena agreed. "That's all a mother can hope for." He hesitated. "You've given her so much." Elena smiled. "We all give what we can. Sometimes the hardest gift is letting go." The wind stirred the leaves above them, scattering sunlight across the grass like coins. Mark wanted to ask something about her past, her marriage, the years before, but the stillness between them felt too sacred to disturb. Instead, he picked up a pebble and tossed it into the water. The rings spread outward, each one softer than the last. Evenings brought a different kind of peace. The air turned cool, and the scent of the garden deepened. Elena often lit a lantern on the porch and read while the others watched films inside. Sometimes Mark joined her, sitting a few steps away, neither speaking nor needing to. One such night, he noticed the book in her hands. "What are you reading?" he asked quietly. "Letters," she said. "Whose?" "My own." He frowned slightly, intrigued. She explained. She had a habit of writing letters she never sent, to friends, to her younger self, to time itself. Does it help? He asked. Yes, she said. Because even when no one answers, the words remind me I'm still here. He thought about that a long time. Maybe that's what we're all doing, he said softly. Writing letters the world will never read. Elena closed the notebook and looked at him. Then may yours be full of light. The lantern flickered between them, painting the night gold and silver. As the days drifted on, Mark began to repair small things around the property. The old gate, a leaky faucet, the creak in the stair. He worked quietly, methodically. Yet Elena sensed that his repairs weren't just for the house. Perhaps they were for himself. She too found new energy. She cooked more often, laughed more easily. And in the mornings she sometimes caught herself humming. Even Anna noticed. "Mom," she said one day, "you look younger somehow." Elena smiled. "Maybe it's the countryside." Anna grinned. "Or maybe it's good company." Elena didn't answer, but her smile lingered after Anna had gone. On the last evening of spring, the three of them dined outdoors under the pear tree. Candles burned in glass jars. Moths circled lazily in the warm air. They toasted the season, to the garden, to peace, to beginnings. When Anna went inside to call a friend, Elena and Mark remained beneath the tree. The light was dim, the candles almost gone. "I'll be leaving next week," Mark said quietly. "Work needs me back in the city." She nodded slowly. "Of course." Neither spoke for a long while. The distance between them felt both vast and impossibly fragile. "You've made this place," he searched for the right word. "Alive. I didn't know stillness could heal this way." Elena's eyes softened. "It wasn't me. The house teaches anyone who listens." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe I'll keep listening, even from far away." A soft wind moved through the branches, scattering petals onto the tablecloth. She brushed one away from his sleeve, her fingers barely touching the fabric. "Take the piece with you," she said. "It doesn't belong to this place alone." He looked at her, not as his wife's mother, not as anyone defined by time, but as a soul who had met his on level ground. "I will," he said simply. And for the first time she believed him. That night, after they all said good night, Elena stood by her window. The moon hung low over the orchard, bright as memory. She thought of the coming days, of departure, of return, and felt neither sorrow nor regret, only gratitude. There are meetings, she thought, that change nothing and still change everything. Below, a single lamp still glowed in the guest room. She turned away and let the quiet fold around her like a blanket. The morning of Mark's departure came quietly, without ceremony. The sky was pale and cloudless, the fields still heavy with dew. A thin mist hung over the road like breath. Anna helped him pack the car, humming softly, cheerful in her ordinary way. Elena stayed by the gate, hands in the pockets of her linen jacket. The soft hum of the engine, the smell of damp earth, the distant cry of a bird, all of it pressed into her memory with strange clarity. When he turned to say goodbye, she met his eyes only for a moment. "Take care of her," she said. He nodded. "Always." Then he hesitated. "And you, take care of the house." She smiled faintly. "It knows how to take care of me." He wanted to say more, but words would have been too heavy for the kind of silence they shared. So he only inclined his head, stepped into the car, and drove away. The gravel crackled under the tires, then faded into nothing. For a while, Elena stood there alone, listening to the echo of departure. The morning light fell across the road, golden and still. Days passed, then weeks. The rhythm of the house settled again, though something unseen had shifted. The rooms felt larger. The air seemed to hold its breath. Anna noticed it too, though she couldn't name it. She worked long hours from the study, planning her next project. Sometimes she would pause and look out the window at her mother tending the garden. "Are you all right?" she asked one afternoon. Elena turned from the rosebush she was pruning. "Of course, dear. Why?" I don't know, Anna said. You just seem quieter. Lena smiled. That's not always a bad thing. She returned to her work, trimming a faded blossom. But inside, her thoughts moved gently toward a man in a distant city, and the quiet that had grown between them like a bridge made of light. Mark's life in the city resumed quickly. Meetings, emails, the sound of traffic echoing through glass towers. Yet everything felt oddly thinner than before, as if the noise had lost its meaning. He tried to sink into work, to let deadlines and plans swallow the stillness that followed him like a shadow. But the memory of the countryside lingered, not in the form of longing but of calm. He missed the rhythm of the mornings, the creak of the porch steps, the way Elena's voice softened when she spoke of the garden. Sometimes, in the middle of a crowded street, he would catch a scent of lilac and stop, just for a heartbeat, feeling again the slow pulse of that other world. At night he began to write. Not emails, not notes for work, but letters. He didn't send them. Like Elena's, they were conversations with silence. You once said that waiting makes you real. I think I understand now. The city has no patience, but I do. Carry the sound of rain with me. I hope the house remembers us. He folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and slept a little easier that night. Back in the countryside, summer ripened. The orchard grew heavy with fruit, and the air shimmered with heat. Elena's days were full, watering the garden, reading, helping Anna plan her next exhibition. Yet in the quiet hours, when the light softened and the shadows lengthened, her thoughts wandered. She didn't wait for messages or calls. Their connection had never needed those things. Instead, she found him in the details. In the hush of evening rain, in the creak of the gate he'd fixed, in the faint scent of sawdust that still lingered in the shed. Sometimes she wrote, too. Not to him, not even to herself, but to time. There are meetings that leave no mark, and meetings that leave the soul rearranged. I do not wish to go back, nor forward. I only wish to remain for a moment in the quiet between. She folded the page and placed it among her others. In August, Anna received an invitation for a small exhibition in the city. It's just a few days, she told her mother. You should come with me. You haven't been away from the house in months. Elena hesitated. The thought of the city, its noise, its speed, felt distant, but there was something else too. A quiet tug beneath her ribs. All right, she said finally. A few days. The train ride passed in a blur of green fields and golden light. Anna talked excitedly about her show, while Elena watched the world roll by. Bridges, rivers, the slow pulse of the horizon. When they arrived, the city greeted them with its usual rush. The air smelled of dust and rain. That evening, at the gallery, Elena stood among white walls and unfamiliar faces. Anna was radiant, moving from guest to guest, her laughter bright and sure. Elena felt proud, deeply, quietly proud, and for a while forgot everything else. Then, as she turned toward a painting near the far wall, she froze. Mark stood there, a glass of wine in his hand, looking at a photograph, one of Anna's. It was the lake from that afternoon in spring. The water shimmered under a sky of silver light, and in the corner, small and almost invisible, was the outline of two figures seated beneath a tree. He looked up. Their eyes met. No words passed between them, none were needed. The distance of months folded in an instant, not through desire, but through understanding. Each had carried the other quietly, faithfully, without demanding anything. He smiled, a small, true smile, and she returned it. Anna approached then, unaware. "Mom, Mark. What a surprise," she laughed. "I didn't know you'd be here." Mark turned to her, calm and warm. "I didn't either," he said. "But I'm glad I came." Elena stood beside them, her heart steady, the noise of the gallery fading into a soft hum. She felt a strange peace, not the fragile kind born of denial, but the kind that comes from acceptance. When the evening ended, they walked together to the door. The night outside was cool, the city lights flickering like distant stars. "Will you visit again?" Anna asked him. "Maybe," he said. "If the house will still have me." Lena smiled. The house remembers everyone who listens. They parted there, simply, gently, with gratitude instead of sorrow. That night, back in her hotel room, Elena opened the window and let the city air in. Somewhere below, a violin was playing. She thought of the house, the lake, the laughter, and the rain. Some love stories do not ask to be lived forever. They ask only to be understood. And in that understanding they live on, not as loss but as light. The streets outside the gallery shimmered faintly under rain-washed lights. The air was cool and smelled of stone and lilac from a nearby florist closing for the night. Cars moved slowly, their reflections running like rivers over the wet pavement. Anna walked between them, her arms full of flowers from guests, talking cheerfully about the evening. "It went better than I hoped," she said, her voice bright. "The curator wants to feature the lake series in the autumn show." "That's wonderful," Elena said, smiling. Mark nodded. "You've captured something rare. Calm that doesn't feel empty." Anna grinned. "Maybe I learned it from both of you," she teased. "You and Mom are the masters of quiet." Elena laughed softly, but her gaze flickered toward Mark. He looked away, pretending to study the passing cars. The moment was brief, delicate, and vanished before Anna noticed. When they reached the corner where the roads split, one toward Anna's apartment, one toward Mark's hotel, Anna turned to him. "Come for breakfast tomorrow," she said. "Just like old times." Mark hesitated. "If it won't be a bother." "Of course not," Anna said. "Mom makes the best morning coffee in the world. You'd better come early before I drink it all." They parted there, with laughter and a promise. Elena and Anna walked home through the soft drizzle, the sound of their footsteps blending with the hum of the city. That night, after Anna fell asleep, Elena stood by the window of her daughter's apartment. The city stretched out before her, towers like dark trees, windows glowing faintly. She could see her own reflection in the glass. Calm, thoughtful, with traces of the countryside still in her eyes. She wondered what it meant, that meeting, that stillness they'd shared in a room full of people. It hadn't been longing, not exactly. More like recognition, a quiet truth that neither time nor distance could undo. The night wind moved through the curtains, carrying the sound of rain from far away. It reminded her of the house, the garden, the gate he had fixed. She thought of him walking alone somewhere below the same clouds, and smiled without sadness. Morning came slowly, light creeping in through the blinds. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery downstairs filled the apartment. Anna was already awake, fussing with plates and flowers. "You don't mind if I invited him, do you?" she asked. Elena shook her head. "No. It will be good to see him." When Mark arrived, the room brightened in an almost imperceptible way. He carried a small bouquet, wildflowers, as if brought from memory rather than a shop. "They reminded me of the countryside," he said simply. Anna laughed. "You too are hopeless. Everything you see turns into a poem." Elena accepted the flowers and placed them in a glass jar. Their scent filled the air, gentle and clean. They ate breakfast together. Toast, honey, coffee, and spoke about ordinary things. Anna's exhibition, the quiet of the countryside, the promise of autumn. Yet beneath their words ran a softer current, unspoken but steady, the way roots move under soil. When Anna left to take a call, Elena turned to Mark. "You seem well," she said. He smiled faintly. "I'm learning to be. The city hasn't changed, but I have." She nodded. "The house did that to you. And you," he added quietly. She looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with one finger. "Sometimes I wonder if the house brings people together so they can hear what their lives are trying to tell them." He studied her face, the calm strength there. "And what did yours tell you?" "That it's never too late to feel awake again." He breathed out slowly, as if those words had loosened something inside him. After breakfast they walked together to the corner cafe for Anna's meeting. The air was bright, washed clean by the night's rain. Leaves shimmered like small mirrors. At the crosswalk they stopped, waiting for the light to change. "I'll visit the house when the season turns," Mark said. If it's all right. Lena smiled. It's always all right. Just listen for the quiet path. It will lead you there. The light turned green. Anna called to them from ahead, waving. They crossed. For a moment, the three of them walked side by side, their shadows long and unbroken in the morning sun. Later that day, after the meetings and farewells, Elena returned alone to the countryside. The train rocked gently, the landscape sliding past like a dream she already half missed. When she arrived, evening was falling. The house welcomed her with its familiar silence, the ticking clock, the scent of dry wood, the soft echo of her own footsteps. She opened the windows, letting the warm air in. Outside, the garden glowed with the last light of day. Somewhere among the apple trees, the wind moved, patient, knowing, kind. She walked out to the porch and sat for a long while. The world was the same, yet filled with quiet music. She realized she wasn't waiting. She was simply living, carrying within her the peace of something understood. The stars came one by one, and in their faint glow she felt neither distance nor time, only presence, of all that had been, all that was, and all that still waited gently beyond the horizon. Autumn came quietly to the valley. The air thinned, the light deepened, and the leaves turned to slow fire along the hills. Each morning the fields woke wrapped in mist, and each evening the wind carried a hint of wood smoke from the village below. Elena moved through these days as one moves through music, aware of rhythm but at peace with silence. The garden had changed color. The rose bushes bowed beneath the weight of time, yet still bloomed shyly now and then, stubborn against the cold. She spent her mornings walking the path down to the lake, the one Mark had once mended after a storm. The boards still creaked in the same places. She would pause there, watching her reflection tremble on the surface. She no longer waited for anything. But every now and then, the thought of him returned like the scent of lilac after rain, soft, unexpected and kind. In the city, Mark's life had settled into its quiet rhythm too. Work filled his hours, but the noise no longer swallowed him whole. On weekends he drove out beyond the suburbs, walking through open fields, letting the wind touch him with a memory of other skies. Sometimes he would stop at a roadside market to buy apples or honey, the simple tastes that reminded him of that spring. The seller once asked, "Visiting family?" He had smiled. Something like that. At night, when he wrote in his small notebook, his words had grown gentler. Not letters anymore. Just small observations. The world feels wider when I move slowly. Peace isn't stillness. It's trust. Some people arrive not to stay, but to leave you more alive than they found you. He never signed these notes, yet somehow they all belonged to her. In late October, Anna called. "I'm thinking of bringing the exhibition to the countryside for a few days," she said. "Just a small open house. It would be beautiful there with the leaves." Elena agreed immediately. "The rooms have been too quiet. The house will be glad." When the day came, she polished the wooden floors, opened every window, and let the scent of the forest drift in. The photographs, Anna's lake, the garden, the orchard, lined the walls like echoes of memory. Guests arrived by afternoon, their laughter filling the space. The house seemed to breathe again, light catching in the glass frames, footsteps weaving through the rooms. Elena moved among them calmly, offering tea, answering questions. Then in the doorway she saw him. Mark stood there, holding his coat, unsure for a moment whether to enter. Their eyes met, and the world, for that small second, felt as if it had found its center again. Anna spotted him and ran forward. "You came. I promised," he said, smiling. Elena watched them talk, the warmth of the scene softening something deep inside her. When Anna turned away to greet another guest, he stepped closer. "It's good to see you," he said. "And you," she replied. "You remembered the road." "I think it remembered me." They both laughed quietly. As the afternoon slipped toward evening, the visitors drifted away, one by one. The last light stretched long across the floor, turning the windows to gold. Anna left to deliver a few prints to a friend in the village. I'll be back soon, she said. Don't eat all the apple cake without me. When the car disappeared down the road, the house fell into the same peaceful hush it had always known. Elena poured 2 cups of tea and carried one to the veranda. Mark joined her, the sound of his steps blending with the rustle of leaves. They sat side by side, looking out at the garden now dappled with amber and crimson. So, he said softly, you've kept it all just the same. Not quite, she smiled. The roses have their own ideas. He looked at her hands, steady, familiar, and then at the light on the horizon. I've missed this. The quiet. The company that understands it. She turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze. Then maybe it's not the quiet you've missed. He didn't answer, but the smile that touched his mouth said everything. The wind moved through the trees, scattering leaves across the porch. They drifted over the railing, golden, endless, weightless. Later, as twilight settled, Elena lit the lantern. The same one they had used that spring during the rainstorm. Its glow brushed over their faces, soft as memory. Mark leaned back, listening to the crickets. Do you ever think the house knows? He asked. It remembers, she said. Every voice, every silence. And what will it remember of us? She thought for a moment. That we were kind. He nodded slowly. That's enough. They sat a while longer, speaking little, watching the first stars appear. When Anna's car lights appeared down the road, Elena rose. Come inside, she said. There's still cake. He followed her, the warm light spilling out into the cool night behind them. That evening stretched into laughter, stories, the comfort of shared history. When the night was over and Mark prepared to leave, he lingered by the doorway. I'll come again before winter, he said. You know the path, she replied. He smiled. I do. Then, for a moment, he took her hand, gently like a promise without words, and left. Elena stood there long after the sound of the car faded, listening to the quiet that wrapped itself around the house. She looked out toward the orchard, the lantern still glowing softly on the veranda. The seasons had turned, yet something enduring remained. Not the rush of passion, not the ache of loss, but a calm, radiant certainty that life had met life and both had been changed. Weeks later, a letter arrived. Brief, written in a hand she knew well. The city is colder now, but I keep the warmth you left behind. The house is with me wherever I go. She smiled, folded the letter, and placed it in the notebook with all her others. Outside, snow had begun to fall, the first of the year. The flakes landed on the window pane, delicate and bright. Elena watched them for a long time, the glow of the fire beside her. In the quiet, she whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to the world itself. Thank you. And the wind outside seemed to answer, carrying her words upward into the soft, endless night. Winter deepened slowly that year, soft as a blanket unfolding over the hills. Frost traced silver veins across the window panes, and the trees stood quiet beneath the pale sky. Elena adjusted easily to the silence, the kind that carries life inside it. She filled her days with small rituals, walking to the lake to feed the birds, polishing the old piano, writing letters to Anna, who was now traveling with her exhibition to new cities. Each morning began the same way. Tea, the rustle of kindling, the faint creak of the wooden porch. Yet beneath these ordinary things lived a new warmth, a quiet pulse she had not felt in years. She didn't need to name it anymore. It simply was, the steady light left behind by someone who had taught her how to breathe again. Sometimes she would read, and the words would catch her halfway through a line. She would look up, and without realizing, she'd smile, as though she could hear a familiar voice carried faintly by the wind. One morning in February, a letter arrived. I'll be nearby next week, traveling for work. If the road isn't too deep in snow, I'd like to stop by. There's something I've been meaning to tell you. Nothing urgent, only true. Elena read it twice. Then she placed it on the kitchen table, beside a bowl of apples, and let herself sit in the silence for a while. She didn't know what he would say, but she felt no fear, only the quiet steadiness that comes when life has already taught you everything you need to understand. The day he came, the world was white. The trees glittered like crystal, and the path up to the house shone under the pale winter sun. She met him at the gate, the same one he had mended long ago. He was carrying a small package wrapped in paper and tied with twine. "You remembered the way," she said, smiling. "I think I could find it even blindfolded," he replied. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and pine. They sat by the fire as snow began to fall again outside. For a time they said nothing, only watched the flames rise and fold. Finally, he handed her the package. Inside was a framed photograph. The lake at dusk, the same one Anna had captured, but taken from another angle. On the back he had written, "For the one who taught me that stillness is not the absence of life, but its truest sound." Elena traced the edge of the frame, feeling something inside her shift, not breaking but opening. "It's beautiful," she said. "It's you," he answered softly. "Or what I learned because of you." They talked for hours. Of Anna's success, of small moments from the past, of the quiet roads between then and now. And when the fire burned low, he rose to go, brushing snow from his coat. At the door he hesitated. "Elena," he said, "you once told me that the house remembers everything. Do you think it remembers this?" She looked around, at the light, at the warmth still lingering in the air. "Yes," she said. "It will remember peace." He smiled, touched her hand lightly and left. Days passed. The snow melted. The first green blades appeared along the path by the orchard. Anna returned home for spring, bringing laughter and color with her. She told stories of cities, of strangers who admired her photographs, of how every new place reminded her, somehow, of home. Elena listened, proud and full. She no longer carried the old ache. She carried continuity, the sense that life had circled back to itself in harmony. Sometimes she would walk down the lane at dusk, watching the horizon fade into violet. The lake was still there, unchanged. But now she saw it differently, not as a mirror of solitude but of belonging. One evening when she returned home, she found a small envelope on her doorstep. Inside was a photograph, the garden in summer, sunlight pouring over the roses. No name, no message. But she recognized the angle, the steady hand that had taken it. She placed it beside his earlier gift on the mantel. For a moment, the two images, lake and garden, seemed to breathe together like two notes from the same song. Elena stood there a long time, then turned off the lamp. The moonlight reached through the window, silver and soft. Years later, when the house finally passed to Anna, she found those photographs carefully preserved in a box. She kept them both framed in her studio, one of the lake, one of the garden, with a note beneath. Some stories do not end. They rest quietly in the places they began. Visitors often asked about them, but Anna would only smile and say, "They belonged to people who understood silence." And in the soft air of the studio, where paint, memory and morning light mingled, the peace of that old countryside house seemed to live on, calm, whole and eternal.